Welcome to the episode of Consensus Unreality that gets us killed.
No, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter
Yeah,
was killed. Was he killed?
we have the
No.
we have the disclosure movement as our backup for this one.
Do we though?
I don't know. It
Uh,
feels very desperate. Lot to unpack. We'll do a little house cleaning beforehand. If you haven't already checked it out, patreon.com/consensusunreality is a spot to visit for exclusive episodes, written content, and more. We just released an exclusive episode there last week talking
I
about.
thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I did too. And it's behind the vast paywall of $5 a month. So
The Great Paywall
don't
of,
yeah.
of Pennsylvania. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
we talked about a bunch of different stuff on that one. Talked about some crazy monarch mind control books. How the
Yeah, I've still been on
CIA.
that kick. Yeah.
Right.
Crazy books kick. Crazy art kick, too. I
Yeah,
don't know if any of you guys know about Louise Abrams, but she's like this incredible artist who I found some like cool pieces by at this paper show, and check out her stuff. I don't know. I don't think she's still alive, but yeah. And
yeah. Check out her stuff. Don't check out patreon.com/consensusunreality.
well, they're already checking that out.
True.
If they're
Okay.
yeah,
Annoying
if they're
ad
good.
portion out of the way.
Yeah,
What are we talking about here today? We're talking about the biggest subject in the game, right?
we're talking about once again UFOs, and this time from the angle of uh, the longtime ufological hanger-on Steven Greer, mover and shaker.
Yeah.
He's put out a few, like, I can't keep up with his documentaries. He's got like a dozen now, but I recently watched the Cosmic Hoax, and I suggested that we watched the newest Greer doc, and then he watched a different one because he put out another like 10 months later. He just doesn't stop.
Yeah, spoiler alert, you're going to encounter a lot of the same reinforced tropes in his documentaries. I mean, yeah, some interesting stuff in there. If you've gotten involved in any small part in, looking into the vast field of ufology or alien disclosure or whatever the hell. I mean, it's funny. I mean, you would have encountered Stephen
Yeah.
Greer probably, and if you haven't, he's one of the bigger names. But it's funny, like
Right. Yeah.
talking to people who kind of tangentially know that I do this thing, but probably haven't listened or something. Like a lot of the time, people will be like, "You do like a podcast about like aliens," and in my head, I'm like, I feel like we never really are talking about aliens. Like a lot of, I tell people, it sounds corny, but it's like we're
Yeah.
doing a podcast about people because it's like people's stories and not that they're made
Yeah.
up. It's just like from the perspective of people, and what they have to say about their experiences, and kind of like the idea of a folklore, whether that be based on you know, actual experiences or interpretations of experiences. We get in the weeds of that, but yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think we like, we're not reading documents and like, oh yeah, well there's a gray and there's a Nordic alien and there's a mantis. Like,
Maybe we should. I mean, the last few episodes have been pretty well in the like UFO phenomenon, like wheelhouse, and I think that's cool to do these kind of mini series. But I mean, I feel like for a while we didn't talk about UFOs at all for like a good solid 5 months.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we waver on opposite ends of maybe what some people see as not connected topics in the occult and UFOs and ufology. I think a lot of where we find a great deal of joy in this thing is like finding connections between the two, especially in the symbols, and maybe a kind of a new idea that emerged is maybe interpretations of the ecstatic experience, and like
Yeah.
a gradients of that, defining a portion of what the hell, the phenomena is.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that, I mean, yeah, because when we talked about Betty and Andreessen and David Huggins and like these more personal, like, yeah, I guess like stories of these people's experiences with what the culture has called like the UFO, thing. Um, yeah, there's so much of it is about like the relationship with mystical and occult and like yeah, ecstatic experiences. But now, kind of, we're back into this zone where I feel like we haven't really been there since we talked about American Cosmic, like where we're talking about this almost like political slash like sociological approach to the UFO thing with Greer, because he's like he makes it sort of like this. Like it feels a lot like almost like on the edge of like the what do you call that, like the nonprofit like kind of tone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
it's
I,
like
th-
very, very mission statementy.
yeah, of course. So much of it's about presentation, funding, and I think maybe we'll start to interrogate or option the interrogation of the character of Steven Greer, maybe on the back end, and we can talk more about like formally what is brought up in the Cosmic Hoax and
Yeah,
identify some isolated things, because it's an interesting documentary. I would recommend it for people who maybe are just like uh, at the tip of the iceberg or whatever the fuck
right,
analogy you want to use of this thing, because it really does reinforce a lot of tropes within this field, such as the famous quote by Eisenhower at the end of his presidency, where he warns
right.
about the power of the military-industrial complex. This is
Yeah,
a quote that's in the introduction of like 15 podcasts. It's in like every UFO movie, like UFO
and
documentary.
book too. Like it's just like
Yeah,
you can't escape it. These people should just like get it like tattooed.
yeah,
It's yeah, but yeah, and I think at least for the Cosmic Hoax, it reminds me of well, it reminds me of all the other Greer documentaries, but it's kind of like nice for an introduction point if you're like for some reason listening to this podcast and have been putting off really like engaging with like where the UFO thing is today. It's nice because it comes from this attack angle against like the whole sort of like Department of Defense like UFO disclosure and quotes kind of like thing, like the Tic Tac video that like the New York Times. It kind of, at least it seems to try to like look at that skeptically, but then it kind of it's actually a pretty strange experience if you're like looking at it with an open mind, because it feels like a very like kind of manipulative kind of like uh tone. Like I felt myself kind of like being like hypnotized or something. Do you know what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah, I have written down here like frantic 3 pages of notes, because these kind of documentaries drive me crazy. It's like a
Yeah,
fucking minefield of of like conflicted ideas, and like
yeah,
we're like willfully talking about a field that has employed disinformation since the beginning of it. So like that kind of like inherent nature to it, the hoaxiness that we always talk about, and also like the intentional spread of disinformation, because capitalizing on this, the use of this disinfo is such a big part of what we're talking about too. And I mean, this is like, yeah, this is an opportunity to kind of like get into the more geopolitical nature of this topic,
right.
the whole idea of the military industrial complex, really the more conspiratorial, nefarious side of ufology and stuff. But as you mentioned, that sort of allure of the documentary Yes, I have written down here, of course, the medium is the message. I mean, like this stupid
Right.
fucking reinforced quote. It's a great, like, it's such a profound statement by Marshall McLuhan, but, you
Yeah.
know, it like draws a line in the sand between like nuts and bolts spaceships with like entities in them from other worlds or whatever, and like the interdimensional idea, which I think is something that we're kind of maybe more interested in, just because it has more fluidity with like folklores of the past, that we talk about, and more
Yeah.
fluidity with the occult, and even
Right. I
like,
mean, I
you
just
know,
think it's like,
fairy
yeah,
lore.
it's not even right. Yeah. Sorry. I think it's like there's no adequate explanation yet. Is basically what I was going to say. Like
Sure.
even interdimensional is like it's like a scientizing of something that might not be. It's like it's still like stuck within that that science medium or whatever.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you don't,
Yeah.
we haven't really gotten to what the mission statement of this is, but I guess, like, you
The
know,
documentary.
yeah, but before even
Yeah.
saying that, like, it's kind of presenting an argument where if you know, it's galvanizing you to believe what he's saying, because it you know, basically says that it means like the stake of humankind, you know.
Right. He says there's like the kind of like totalizing massive statements that make me kind of be like, there's something not right here at all. Like when he says like the revelation of this information would end climate change overnight, and it's like not like what like. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess he's just trying to say that it's like it's a big secret that's being kept, and that the people in power don't care about
Well, that's
anything but
yeah.
yeah.
I think the best way to approach this is like every time one of those grand like statements comes up, let's just like spearhead what it's trying to say, and what, you know, maybe some thoughts are about that, because obviously the other documentary I started watching, and the context of a lot of his documentaries is that we have basically recovered technology from extraterrestrials, and that, you know, branches of the privatized military industrial complex, for example, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, and all that, have basically cracked the code of anti-gravitic crafts, and, you know, it went immediately covert. So to speak,
Yeah.
we've had technologies that are far beyond combustible jet propulsion and stuff, which would basically consist of like uh, creating an electromagnetic field. Therefore, there's like no aerodynamic resistance. So that's why you see all these like odd shapes in UFOs and stuff.
Right.
Um, and I mean, it's of course, like, that might sound crazy to people, but like, why are we still using combustible engines from like the 1920s? That also seems a little insane. You know, like even fucking
Yeah.
SpaceX is just fucking rocket fuel. You know, like,
Right. And he gets like the rocket connection is interesting because a lot of the sort of I feel like the documentary, like all of his documentaries, do this thing where they're calling back to like a name that you know as a way to justify like his position. So Werner von Braun is like the
oh, yeah,
one of the big ones here, and who obviously was the Nazi who invented like the V2 and stuff, and then was instrumental in creating NASA and
getting us to the
most of our
moon.
space program. Right? Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like the at least like the sore thumb that sticks out in the Project Paperclip thing. He's not certainly not the only one, but he's like, if you're trying to explain to someone that like we hired a bunch of Nazis after the war, he's like the easiest one to point out because he was like on Disney and stuff. But so yeah, they have this woman. What is her name? I just looked it up, so I will find it. Carol.
Oh,
Carol.
what the hell is her name?
Carol Rosen.
Yeah, Rosen. Yeah, who was like,
And she was like his
Braun.
deathbed. Yeah.
Yeah, but she would like legit worked with Werner von Braun,
Yeah.
in NASA and stuff. And she claims to, I mean, she like was close to him in life, and she claims to have had a deathbed confession where he basically said that, you know, the military industrial complex consists of a series of false flag events
Right. Yeah. The whole
that
false flag thing, which is a real military tactic, of course, but it's also like such a buzzword.
yeah, well, yeah, it's crazy what the fucking, I don't know, I mean, yeah, this is a weird episode. Like, I feel like I'm gonna, you know, bite my tongue or something, but like it's weird how like certain buzzwords surrounding conspiracy stuff like false flag and like uh deep state, you know,
Yeah.
are like me and no things, you know, but like
Right.
I think it's been exposed that like the Gulf of Tonkin was, you know, basically a false flag, and like
Sure. I mean, people use it all the time. It's like it's like an effective thing. It's like an effective tool in war. Like,
yeah,
um,
and you know,
yeah.
like there's a lot of arguments to be had there about other events in
Right.
United States history, but
Right.
anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, let's have a little nuance with that kind of shit, people. And it like clearly, if you look into like the military industrial complex and stuff, like the application of the term deep state, like kind of plays. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, and I feel like even the term military industrial complex is like an eyes glaze over kind of term at this point in like history. But if you actually look at what that connotes or whatever, it's like kind of what is it's like it's what we have. Like there's no arguing that like we have this private industry that sort of eggs on our military so that it keeps buying from them, and it's just kind of like this vicious growing cycle. It's just kind of like a miniature version of like world corporate capitalism.
Yeah,
So it's kind of
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I
yeah,
mean, I think it's really interesting too. You take that trope of the Eisenhower speech, and
yeah,
you know, like the repetition of it is not to actually belittle how crazy it is that what he said, because I think that at that point in the United States, like Eisenhower was realizing that the office of the presidency was getting, and the executive office was getting sidelined,
yeah,
essentially. So he was admitting like a coup of power from
right,
a private military industrial complex within the United States, and he's warning about that. And it's really insane and really interesting. What the hell? What's the back end of that quote? Shit, I wrote it down here. Oh my god, my notes are just like scribble because I was just like, I just got done watching
yeah.
this, so it's all pretty fresh.
It's crazy that this film was called Cosmic Hoax, and that the first episode of our show was Cosmic Trickster. It's like very funny.
Right. Okay. So he said, yeah. Also
Yeah,
in that
what did he
speech,
say?
Eisenhower says that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite. That's a
Right.
really
Oh no.
weird, like, that's a really strange thing for a U.S. president to say on his way out of office. You know?
It is. I mean, I guess. Yeah, like we were saying earlier, I feel like the people who are into this kind of stuff are so bored, desensitized to it, but it really is kind of a haunting
Oh, it's
speech.
terrifying. If it's not like,
Yeah.
remove the context of UFOs or whatever the hell people apply
Right.
to it. It's just like daunting to think
But
about
it's true.
what
It's
kind
like
of
it totally
scary
happened.
shit he was actually fucking talking about. And I mean, it's interesting to identify another trope therein because it's like a huge part of UFO lore, that Eisenhower had a famous meeting with extraterrestrial entities.
Right. Yeah, that one's, I mean, and it often comes paired with this photoshopped image of him like shaking hands with a little gray alien.
Yeah, and there was
And that's
supposed to
another thing
be.
that's interesting though, like the way photoshopped and like known fake images like stick in this field, like no matter how adamantly people like debunk them or whatever. And I've always hated like the role of the debunker because it's like a killer of magic sort of, but it's also like so essential in this because otherwise it's just people like, and I don't want to like come out too strong against Greer, but it's just like people like Steven Greer, like as he does in this film, like taking a photo of a 1920s like autopsy back when like this was sort of like a common occurrence where like medical students would take photos of them with like a real person's like decomposing ruined corpse and like smile and like all this like crazy shit. And so he just took one of those where the corpse was especially defiled and like said, this doesn't even look human. It's like, well, yeah, because like these psychopathic doctors, like, like we're practicing on it, man. And
I don't know why
that's
I'm
like,
laughing at that. That's horrible.
no, it's true. It's like the first like big reveal of this particular documentary, and that's like a sort of rhythmic thing that they do in a lot of these. Do you remember that like? Well, I mean, I don't know what side of the fence you fall on, like the Atacama humanoid or whatever. Like,
Yeah, let's circle back to the Atacama humanoid.
right.
I think I was thinking about that and I wrote it down. We'll come back to that. So yeah, I don't know.
I think we've talked about it before. I'm still kind of agnostic on it, but it has that kind of flavor of like the hoax,
Yeah, let's return to that because I kind of remember watching that one when it came out, and we'll get back to
what was that one called? Yeah.
Serious.
Oh, was it Serious? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it would serve us well to establish the actual theme of this documentary already. What he's basically
haven't we?
I don't know. I don't think so. What he's saying is that there's going to be a false flag alien event, and that is going to like basically seal the deal in unifying the world's like some grand conspiratorial military industrial complex. And it will
kind of like Project Bluebeam, right?
Exactly, like Project Bluebeam,
which is so weird. Yeah, because it's like kind of a right-wing fantasy, or at least I've always thought of it that way. But I guess it's kind of apolitical. But I've always seen it sort of put forth by like, especially lately, at least, as like sort of like the next thing after the COVID hoax. Like the alien hoax.
Right. I mean, it seems absurd. But I don't actually think it is that absurd because. No. Like the way, if you see the inklings, and this is what the documentary is getting at the heart of too, if you see the way that the UFO narrative is being put into, our mainstream media currently, it's framed in a defense narrative. So it's all about like these things or this phenomena being an aerospace, national security threat. So we must research it. Yeah. We must find out who's behind flying these things because it's a threat to our airspace. That's how it's being framed, which is really interesting. It's very deliberate. It's very across the board. And that
totally
is inspired by the To the Stars Academy, which is attacked in this documentary.
I love it.
Yeah. Luis Elizondo, who is like... I think it's pretty much accepted by every crazy person like us that he's like, an intelligence,
he's admittedly
operative. Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of just like the football version of Richard Doty, like he's like the meathead version of like the nerd that is Richard Doty, who is also interviewed in this movie. Like I feel like they wheel out Richard Doty like so often, even though he's like. I mean, if he's not lying, more or less admitted to driving a person so crazy that he died, like Paul Benowitz.
That interview is actually, it's from like another Greer documentary. Like he reuses a lot of shit, like totally. I mentioned. But yeah, we've talked about Louis Elizondo. He's the guy. If you don't know who we're talking about, he looks like a South Park character, and he's got like the goatee, and he's on every news show as like the front person of the. The Navy has videos of UFOs, blah blah blah. He is cited in a weird clandestine counterintelligence case, I think in Afghanistan or something. And his the office that he worked out of in the DoD is some real shadowy shit. So he clearly is some behind the green door kind of guy.
Right. I mean, yeah, he's just playing this role of like the UFO disclosure guy because he can like sort of he has the skills to do it, and it's kind of like all these guys kind of play this weird like double or triple like masked sort of like figures where like they know that a lot of us know that they're like faking it, but like that's also part of their like it's like this crazy, to use like another cliched conspiracy term, like 5D chess or whatever.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Like even Greer, maybe, I don't know.
yeah, I would argue that, the war is lost. Like if the way that, everybody else is like getting the story is just, through the whole invigoration or reinvigoration of the UFO narrative is through like the New York Times article and the Tic Tac video and stuff. And, it's probably the most likely scenario that quote unquote UFO or UAP video is like some technology that we have, like,
Oh yeah, I think
because
so.
it's basically said that it was in a dogfight with like naval pilots. So yeah, I don't think that goes down in our airspace if it's not ours.
And it's also like so outside of the like weird realm that like people who encounter these beings or say they like it's like I mean it's kind of like the same tension that there's been since like the beginning of the modern UFO era of like the people who contact the supposed beings that are in quotes aboard these ships, and then like the ex or currently military people who are like talking about the defense implications of it. Like the same kinds of books of these two categories have been like the the two poles of this argument for 70 years or whatever.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah.
it's kind of crazy that like and Greer is interesting because he's kind of like right between the two of them. He's like kind of talking about this CE5, close encounter to the fifth kind protocol that he like very like telemarkety, not tele like what's the word, like very like salesman-y kind of like talks about like you have to come out into the desert and like experience the CE5 events like,
Hmm.
and only I can show you. It's like $5,000. So it's there's that hoaxy aspect to it, but then he's
Yeah,
talking about like yeah, like the his contacts with like government officials and like the technology that we've used from these craft. Like so he's kind of doing both.
right. I would say that therein lies like the true hopelessness of this this subject that we talk about, because like I think within this movie, The Cosmic Hoax and Expose, there is a lot of like truth to it. Like
Yeah.
the unchecked power of our military industrial complex and these private entities who get interest from our government, and like the way that like branches of our government, being Congress and the front facing government that we have, like doesn't even really get access to a lot of these covert programs. Like
Right.
there's a labyrinth that faces them to even like try and um, infiltrate that at
Or
all.
yeah, or maybe it's just not their job. Like I mean, given the current political climate, I feel like it would not be hard to believe that like they just don't have any say or interest in doing anything that actually matters. Like I don't know.
Yeah, and then like beyond that, like you have the barons of the story itself, like the barons of disclosure, like Steven
Right.
Greer or
Christopher Mellon, right?
Christopher Mellon. Leslie Kean is a
Oh,
reporter who he
right.
bashes in this documentary, and she's responsible for a lot of yeah, publicizing the UFO narrative through major media and print outlets. It's
Right.
it's like the way that these narratives are directed by, again, people, and like people's own personal interests, corporate interests, interests of nations and people, and what people think are best for nations, national security. Um, it's
Yeah.
not about aliens. It's about it's about people and like what people choose to do with this information or even like
Yeah.
consideration of this information. Because
I mean,
somebody
yeah.
like Leslie Keene, it seems like she realized early on that like fighting for actual disclosure was like against the best interest of her making a career for herself. So she's like,
Sure.
if I sidle up to the defense narrative, I'm gonna be like the reporter of this story. So there again, career
Right.
goals, and that's like the story that people get. That's where the medium is the message again. Like that's you
Mm.
talk to average people and they're like, "Did you see that shit? The Navy was dog fighting a UFO. The videos released in New York Times." And,
Right. No, it's great. I mean, yeah, Keen's interesting. And that is something I do like about this documentary is how it's like so like fucking like what's like bitchy. like like uh it's just like mean to like his like I don't know, like his enemies, I guess, or just like his like the people who like don't buy his line. But and like often they're deserving of like the treatment because they are just like I think often they're just a kind of paid off like journalist industrial complex like saps. But I don't know. Yeah.
what would you say, without getting into the context of this question? What would you say is like a more cutthroat social environment, ufology or the occult?
Man, yeah. Probably the occult.
Yeah, I just think that like the occult has more teeth to it, where they're like ready to just like end
It's less
somebody's.
nerds, I think. I think UFO stuff is like more nerds who are like less willing to like, and the occult is more like people with like, never mind, I'm not going to diagnose them,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah. Yeah. Maybe we'll save that all for a Patreon
yeah.
episode one in 5 years from now. But yeah, no,
Uh,
I think like the UFO scene has less teeth to it because
yeah,
everybody is both like marred by disinformation and
right.
like just gossiping about each other, where they're like, "No,
And
that
there's less
guy's
of
a
a
quack."
tradition too.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's like there just hasn't been that much of it. So it's like, yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of that kind of like, because people in the occult don't call each other like hoaxers or like they don't like try and debunk each other as like magical workings or whatever. They just like say, you're a Nazi, you know?
yeah,
It's like, and I guess you could say that in UFOs too, because a lot of them are, but
right,
I
right,
guess you could say that about like any subculture. I don't know.
sure. Yeah, no. All right, so getting back to this documentary here, I mean, like, okay, so what is like the mechanics of the idea of a cosmic false flag, you know, framed as like framed as like a military event or whatever, or requiring some military response. So, I mean, you have the Ronald Reagan speech where he's talking
Yeah.
about an alien threat, like
Yeah.
unifying. Hang on one sec.
All
Uh,
right.
yeah, sorry about that. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, like, what are the mechanics of that? You have the Ronald Reagan Star Wars speech where he's talking about an
Yeah.
alien event unifying the globe, and you get a literal response there where we put like anti-ballistic satellites in space and stuff,
Right.
which are said to like it's presented as this means of like stopping a heavenly body or like an asteroid or whatever, a meteor, but it's really like an anti-Soviet defense
Right.
framework of like satellites. So that happens, and you could kind of see like the first inklings of this, and then you get somebody like Richard Doty in this documentary, who is responsible for the whole Dulce base
Yeah.
affair with Charles Benowitz and that the disinformation.
Paul.
Paul Benowitz, sorry. Oh my god, I always do that.
Charles
Charles
Berlitz.
Berlitz.
Yeah.
Me and my friend were actually just talking about that. That's so funny. But yeah, so you get that whole disinformation campaign, and then he comes out and admits that, you know, aspects of our intelligence agency were simulating UFO abductions. he
Yeah.
says they were doing it domestically. There's other reports of us doing it in
That
South.
part's crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I
There
love that.
and
I don't love it, but you know.
that's like that whole Nick Redfern book I was just
Right, it's like
reading too.
yeah, My Labs, military abductions. That was in what was I reading where they were talking about that? Oh, the later Betty Andreasson books talk a lot about that
Mm-hmm.
kind of, right? Do they?
Yeah,
They do.
yeah, right.
Um,
And the black
and then
helicopter stuff.
yeah, right. And the Carla Turner's books, Into the Fringe and Taken, are both quite a bit about that. Um, yeah, that stuff is, and of course, like having Doty talk about it, it's like crazy because when that kind of person speaks on anything, like you have no, like it's, you'd think that like he would be lying, but then like he's
Yeah.
maybe it's not, like it's like
Why
it
would you?
remains, yeah,
That doesn't make sense to lie about that. Like
it
that's
remains like 50-50. Like what, it's like you have to go through like all these phases of being like, well, if he's lying, then like maybe he's lying by telling the truth. Like all these psychological operations people are like, well, I mean, they're just professional liars, which is like
sure. Yeah,
a skill that some people have, but
but
it's kind of crazy.
he's so legit about it, and like
I know.
he's like literally from the intelligence branch of the Air Force, so like he's like
AFOSI.
yeah, uh, yeah. I mean, why lie about that? I mean, it's so strange, and that's where that idea of like 5D chess comes in or whatever. But
Right. I mean, it could just be his job to just go out and bullshit, and like some of it's true. I mean, I guess that is his job, but like he could just be like his. It could just be like go on these documentaries and just say whatever you want. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Sometimes it should be true. Sometimes you should just make it up and make people like oh man, what's her name? What's the like? Do you remember? Did you watch Mirage Men?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
The famous woman who's like the crop circles expert, Linda Moulton Howe.
Oh yeah, yeah. Linda Moulton Howe.
Like
Yeah.
go out and make Linda Moulton Howe insane. Like that's your job for the day for Richard Doty.
Right.
It's
Right. What a strange career she had, where we've talked about
yeah,
her before, but she was like, a traditional journalist, and then she kind
right.
of got obsessed with the cattle mutilation phenomena, and then sort of, I guess, at some point started playing the game and just became like a part of the coast to coast information industrial complex where they're all just like
Yeah,
fighting for scraps. But yeah, no, Mirage Men is a fascinating documentary, really, really crazy, and also that Nick Redfern book, I believe it's called Top Secret Alien Files. I think I talked about it on the Andreasen Affair episode. It really creates a scene of plausibility for simulated UFO abductions,
yeah,
and how that could be achieved, and sort of getting into the heart of like the tactile strangeness of a lot of alien abductions, the sort of like medical examination-y qualities to them, and really how it's like a lot of it is plausibly perpetrated by humans, and when you're under the influence of certain substances, you could easily be made to believe that the propellers of a helicopter are like a UFO, or I mean, also Greer in this documentary talks a lot about how we have a variety of different crafts, and using
yeah,
a spectrum of different hybridized propulsion mechanisms, electromagnetic propulsion with like a combination of jet propulsion, etc. So I mean, you could easily like fake it in a number of different degrees. Yeah, so I mean, is the whole blue beam thing real? Is it plausible? If it is, I guess it is pretty as scary as this documentary presents.
right.
But there's another side to it, this story, which is a big part of Steven Greer's mantra, which is that there are extraterrestrials visiting Earth, and they're benevolent. and he claims to have created a set of protocols for, creating situations of contact with these extraterrestrials through his CE5, which is like a combination of like transcendental meditation and also like group meditation as a means for like almost like drawing down UFOs and
Yeah, it's almost like like spiritualism, like
spiritualism. Yeah, really.
um, which it's so funny that it's like everything eventually, like how they say like everything will eventually, not everything, but a lot of different things have like parallel evolved into crabs. You know how like that's like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all of these different things eventually evolve into channeling.
Right, right.
Yeah,
That's so true,
because
man.
it's just like the path of least resistance. It's just like, well, they're talking in my head, so like, so you can't tell me. Like, yeah. So I don't know.
I don't know why that's so funny, but it is. Yeah, and I mean, like, here's another big time trope to throw out there that I actually myself was thinking a lot in this documentary, and it's like, okay, like actually, I can kind of like get into the mode of believability of humans faking, alien contact as a means for
Yeah,
like just escalating the military industrial complex further because like you see our reliance on fossil fuels and stuff and like
right.
how is it possible that we're still so reliant on this? But it's because people, very powerful people, are very interested in keeping us on that track, and I'm sure
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have a plan laid out for when that's all gone and what the next thing is, and I'm sure they'll be in control of it. Um, but the whole extraterrestrials are like legitimately here. They're from other places in the universe. They're like quite flesh and bones, and so are their crafts are quite not nuts and boltsy, but they're physical objects. Um, you know, well, here's the trope: like, why don't they land on the White House lawn? You know, if they're
right.
if they're truly like powerful enough to disarm nukes, which is another very folklory element of ufology, if they're powerful enough to do that, if they were so alarmed by our development of nuclear arms, well then what are we supposed to assume that they're so much like us that they would have an anthropological like non what do you call that non interjection like policy, like
Oh, not you're like a
non interventive like
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Because why wouldn't they just come out like on every news channel and be like, Look, we're here. We just want to say we're cool. We just don't
But
want you
why
guys
would
to.
they?
We don't want you guys to blow yourselves up. I mean,
Right,
that's what he's saying, though. Like,
right. Yeah, it's just like something I don't understand about that, like the Greer and like to some extent the like secret space program people, like the kind of people who theorize that like we're a part of this like intergalactic sort of civilization, and it's kept like I did like I'm like willing to go far enough and accept that there could be like humanoid aliens. In fact, I think there are that have visited here and like interacted with humanity. But like, why would they? Why would we assume that they have like civilizations or like moral codes that have anything to do with like humans?
right,
Which is why I just don't like understand why that's always part of the like it's always part of the thing is like they have like armies and like they have like governments and stuff, which is like those are like such particularly like human traits,
right,
like
yeah, particular
or at
to
least I
like
mean maybe not yeah
us as
maybe not armies but like
chimpanzees, basically. Like very mammalian qualities.
right yeah like these things that if evolution is true kind of developed out of long like foraging and adversarial like climates like
Mm-hmm.
that's the reason we're not nomadic foragers or whatever is part of the reason we have like buildings like at all like vehicles. It's kind of like So it's just it falls apart a little for me there if I'm being like super buzzkilly about it. But it's also
I don't
maybe
think
it's
you
true.
are. Yeah.
They have like Congress on in space. They have like presidents.
The Intergalactic Federation,
Right.
like all those YouTube channelers are on the nose,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they are
Right.
actually in communication with the Intergalactic Federation.
And yeah, there's like I'm a vice provost for the Alpha Centauri campus. It's like it's just I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling a little more like make fun of vibes tonight, but
Well, yeah, I
because
don't know.
sometimes
This kind of stuff is like, I don't know, something that's like trying to galvanize you so much is oddly like disheartening. But I don't know if that speaks to
yeah,
like
no,
our
it's
cynical
true.
nature as like
Yeah,
Americans. We've seen enough of the show or
right.
something. But like,
Yeah,
yeah, uh,
it does feel like it remind like for some reason I don't know if this is true, but yeah, the Greer sort of documentary uh, milieu kind of reminds me of like the American Democrats, just like this kind of like
yeah.
inspirational, like big promises, like moral sort of like on the right side of history, and then it's always just like nothing happens, and it's like
Absolutely
it turns
nothing.
out they were just lying.
Yeah,
Like,
it's ridiculous. Like, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's just like front facing,
yeah,
you know, media hijinks or whatever. But yeah, no, it's kind of insane. But
yeah,
I know one thing. I think one thing that is really interesting about Greer's stuff, though, is the idea that technology has been suppressed. I mean, like the again another trope with Tesla, and like if you look into ufology stuff, like everybody always talks about Tesla technology
yeah,
and how Tesla, figured out free energy and he was suppressed. And I mean, like I'm not trying to also, I know that like my tone sounds like I'm like belittling that concept because it's true. He was like attempting to do these things, and
yeah,
J.P. Morgan famously was like, we can't put a meter on that shit, so we're not fucking doing it, and
right,
like destroyed the Warburton Tower, um, which was supposed to transmit free energy to like naval ships and stuff and whatever. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, like the idea that technology has been suppressed, I think that is true, and like you see like the amount of patents that have been seized for quote unquote national security reasons. Who
mm,
knows what kind of technological developments could be in those things? I think energy is a field that you just like you don't fuck with either. I think like it is kind of like an unspoken thing that you don't really try and do anything in energy if it's not using like combustible propulsion, and that's why
right,
like
yeah. They
Elon
don't let you,
yeah, that's why like Elon Musk is allowed to do what he does is because
right?
it's
Because it all goes back to coal or natural gas or oil eventually.
yeah. I mean, you're fooling like Teslas just run. Oh, yeah, Teslas. All right, right. But yeah, they just run off like the power grid, which is like 90%
Right.
fossil fuels anyway. So
It just makes it's like it's such an American thing because it just makes individuals feel like they're free of like the fossil fuel industry while nothing around them changes.
right, absolutely. Um,
It's crazy.
but yeah, no, there's the example of that guy who like made the car. I think it's called like the Surge engine, where he like said he made a car that ran on water, and he said that the end like the I don't know the H2O converter or whatever was only going to cost everybody like $1,200, and like I guess he did get a lot of interest from like people about this engine. He apparently drove the buggy around everywhere and like was on some news broadcasts and shit, and he just like died mysteriously or something, got hit with
Yeah.
the heart attack gun or whatever, and the whole thing just vanished. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's probably countless examples like that that are out there and makes you wonder. And that's like a big part of Greer's work. And I think it's weird how somebody could like be putting that information out there, and then also kind of like scamming on the side of like creating this pseudo religious organization, and like also
Right.
having his own like industrial complex of documentaries. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely worth a watch, like for
I think
sure.
so. I mean, I think like of the ones I've seen by him, it's one of the better ones because it has like so much, because so much of it's so like on the attack. I feel like it's kind of suits him better than the more like videos of him crying and like trying to like be a human being. But I feel bad saying something mean about him because like he plays the role of like concerned person who's dedicated his life to telling the truth. He plays that pretty well, but
Hmm.
you can kind of see it, the mask of that role slip sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, yeah, it's weird.
It is, maybe it's legitimate, or I don't know if it's legitimate, but maybe it's at least genuine. I just don't know.
I don't know. He's a slippery one. I mean, I think the CE5 thing seems to show its hand a little bit,
That's
because
what I mean. Yeah.
that is some weird territory. And like I think like Demi Lovato,
Right.
like went out there
Yeah.
in the desert with his CE5 meetups, and she said she had like experiences of,
I think like a few celebrities have gone.
yeah. So I don't know. It's pretty suspicious. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. We talk about the correlations between channeling and ufology a lot, and how
Right.
dicey of a thing that is. The trickstery nature of it.
Sure. I mean, it's like, I mean, ufology is just like made of tricksters.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's probably like 70-30, tricksters to like, what would you call it? Like genuine people, or like people who aren't consciously trying to like do something else by doing UFOs.
Yeah, it's literally a playground for deception.
Right.
For
That's
like
kind of what I like about it.
no, I think that's what's so fascinating about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, with that, like you kind of like through the adversity of that cultural element, that's where you get things like new developments in folklore and shit, which we talk about, um, which only come out of this like muck of lies and
Right. Yeah.
hoaxing and getting over on people, but also very genuine experiences that are unexplained or hard to explain, or and hard to interpret.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Just like stories.
but it's
Like,
weird.
yeah.
Another thing, is in this documentary, Greer is kind of talking about the phenomenon in a very nuts and boltsy physical way, but all of his like quote like photos of extraterrestrials at the CE5 things are very like
Right.
ethereal and like light beings kind of stuff.
Right. That's what I was saying about how kind of like he's kind of like in both. He's like on both sides of the field with. He's playing for both teams. I don't know. He's like, yeah. So much of it is trying to like play the game that like Tom DeLonge and whatever are playing of this like. He's trying to like play the opposite side. Like of the like nuts and bolts argument. Like, but then at the same time, he's doing this like, yeah, they're like ethereal beings that can't quite be captured or seen in like a traditional sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's crazy that that's the first time we mentioned Tom DeLonge's name too. Like,
Yeah, he goes after him. What is he like? He just like basically just like makes like mean like meme videos. like he just like throws in like clips of Tom DeLonge saying stupid shit out of context.
yeah,
like
he's like,
just
I'm
like
gonna eat my fart or something. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, like, how a character like Tom DeLonge gets wrapped up in this whole story. It kind of seems like he's, I don't know, not to sound mean with this term or whatever, but he's like the useful idiot, where he
Yeah,
like
yeah.
is probably somebody who was like genuinely interested in the subject and like had some personal experiences, and then just like because of his
Probably.
fame and
Yeah.
and his his prominence as a famous musician, like he was fed, disinformation and used as like the recognizable face of this to get buzz. For the young
Right.
people, while also injecting this, very militaristic defense narrative to it. And I mean,
It
it's
is crazy that he's like so like he's supposed to be like this like middle finger pop punk like kind of little freak, and then he's like coming out like I have a bunch of United States military intelligence insiders behind me on this. It's just
dude.
like
I mean,
crazy.
To the Stars Academy has the former head of the CIA's domestic operations. So that's like not. I mean, come on, like,
Right.
what are we talking about here? Like this, and like
Yeah.
all these like top level aerospace engineers from like Lockheed Martin and stuff. So
I mean, I guess like the argument is that like these are the only people who know the truth, but like why would these people tell the truth first of all? Like I don't know. The whole thing is so uh, goofy, and I can see why people would like come to the conclusion that like all of UFOs is like just a big government military psyop hoax, but
right, yeah,
it's not. Like it's like you're halfway there, I think, if you stop at like disavowing it as like the United States military or like in quotes the CIA like doing all of it.
right.
That's yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's
you're
just
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that is kind of like an end result of this the kind of frustration with the field and stuff too.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of it is that, but like that's not all of it. Like it's kind of I've been having this like feeling about not just this kind of thing, but all of the sort of like fringy stuff where like the mass culture of it is so full of like deception and like money grabs and stuff that like I've moved into, like I mentioned earlier, just like looking for like individual like often crazy people and like just like people that have been forgotten, like artists and writers and people who like have these paranormal or sometimes alien experiences or at least represent these experiences. And just like trying to like champion those people like a little bit more than like dealing with like this millionaire who
totally.
takes people out into the desert. It's kind of like that's where my philosophy is at on it. But on the other hand, it's so fun to talk about the mass culture of it in the same way it's fun to talk about movies or something.
Yeah, well, I think like when you first get interested in the subject, like I think what comes with the territory of that is like the idea that there's information that is secret that
Yeah.
would contain some like revelatory stuff, and I think that's probably true, but what kind of information that is like, probably not what you'd expect, or at least
Yeah.
like the stuff that and all the stuff that is like top secret documents that gets leaked, a lot of it's like notoriously hoaxed and fake.
Right.
um
And like our information ecosystem is so permanently fucked that like no one will believe anything ever.
yeah, right.
It's like it's just there's disclosure at this point I think is impossible, and I don't know when because I feel like even like in like the early 2010s it was still like something that people I thought was possible, like if someone came like if enough people in like the government or like if something on TV happened, like there were ways in which it could be possible that there could be some semi-definitive like disclosure that would satisfy a lot of people, but at this point I just don't think we live in a world where like there's any kind of mass truth anymore.
Also,
Except,
like,
yeah.
what I don't understand is like why would there be the need for some sort of blue beam level cosmic false flag when Donald Rumsfeld could come out in public and be like, we lost $4.5 trillion. Like they could just do this. It's all. That's what I'm saying. Like the war is
Right.
lost. Like it's already has no accountability.
No,
Like
yeah,
they could just be putting shit up in fucking space right now, and like you wouldn't
I
know.
think they
Like
are. Yeah,
what do they need more? Like where are they going to get more money from taxpayers or
right.
something that's going to fund
Yeah,
this? Like I don't really get
right.
that connect, but
No,
maybe
yeah,
I'm naive.
the
I don't
blue
know.
beam thing. If that kind of thing does happen, I think it probably has more to do with like the even weirder like world of like cultural and social manipulation.
Right,
Like
right,
I
right.
doubt it has to. I doubt it's going to be like a uh, what's that infamous date that style like military justification, like like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reason to go to war. I think it's going to be more like
Mm-hmm.
like we need to change the way people act in general, and we're going to do it this way with like without the need for legislate. Like, I think that's kind of the only way that the Project Bluebeam paranoia makes sense to me is if it's like a an experiment in like massive behavior modification.
Sure. Right, right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, it
Yeah,
makes a lot more sense when you know, frame it like that. Um, I mean, it's interesting too, like just looking at like science fiction, um, in terms of like the mass cultural sense and like films concerning the alien phenomena, how like 95% of them are, you know, a hostile takeover essentially by extraterrestrials, the War of the Worlds effect, so to speak.
yeah,
You know, that's why the CIA came out and they had to kill Orson Welles with the red meat and Merlot gun or whatever.
yeah.
Like, uh,
Poor guy. Yeah,
no, it's crazy though. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know if that's just speaks more to like human nature and our fear of both the unknown and each other, like in the Twilight Zone sense.
right, right. Yeah, I don't know. It I liked this documentary though because it did. If I liked it, if only as like a um, very specific like thing against which to think, like a thing that like I can position myself as like. Do you know what I mean? Like where you can kind of like you see something and it's you don't like it because you think that it's like really does a great job of expressing or explaining how you feel about the issue, but because it's like helps set you up as like like determining your own thoughts on it in opposition to it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's kind of how I feel about it. Like, and I don't disagree with it, you know, much more than half the time. Like, I think it's half right, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, the way that we're just so cynical in the way we're like taught to distrust. And I mean, it's probably especially us more so, but
yeah,
like the distrustful nature towards like the sentimentality of this version of presentation within this like documentary and stuff, and the dramatic
yeah,
music and things like. I know that it works to achieve its message, but it to me it kind of like works against it in a way. But then like I don't know
yeah.
what the other side of that is. Like it would probably be so boring where it's just like watching a seminar of, you know, a
There's something about that though that is more like even if it's just like some like guy up there like on Adderall, like talking with no background music and a PowerPoint for 2 hours. For some reason, it feels more legit to me than somebody who like put $500,000 into like a semi fancy like documentary that has like public domain classical music in it, you know?
right. Yeah, I would come back on that and say I don't think we've really mentioned, but like the amount of like legit characters within like the disclosure movement, the amount of like actual like briefings that Steven Greer has done for,
Yeah.
you know, he says he's briefed presidents, and maybe that's true, but I'm sure he's like briefed, literally like briefed like official people from like administrations
Oh
and
yeah.
shit, and like the amount of like ex Air Force, ex military, even fucking ex NASA people like within like
Yeah.
who are attend his presentations and like present themselves and like their own experiences and information. Like it's pretty compelling.
That part of it is like well he always brings up that what was that called? Like the That thing he did in like the early 2000s where he had like
Yeah, he got like everybody he had that was willing, and they did
a press conference kind of.
yeah, they did a press briefing at the what the hell is that called in Washington, the
You know, the thing. Yeah.
Associated
That
Press,
something like
yeah,
that. No,
whatever.
that yeah. But like this like very formal series of like not speeches but like testimonies by
Hmm.
quite a bunch of people, like legitimate people, not the usual, not like Richard Doty going up there,
Yeah,
although
no,
maybe he did.
like sincere pilots and shit who like
Yeah,
saw and documented uh, unidentified crafts and just the whole gambit. So yeah, I mean that aspect of it is legit compelling, and if you're not drawn into the cynical nature, like that stuff kind of speaks to the disclosure movement and what it's at best trying to achieve.
right. It has all the hallmarks of like a sucking as much money out of its audience for as long as it possibly can kind of thing. The disclosure movement in general, and like all of the various apparently like nonprofit things within it.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it like it's weird to me. It seems like a lot of people genuinely like enter this field journalistically, like
I think
trying
they
to
do.
fight for truth or trying to like expose something, and they just realize like how Herculean or impossible of a task that is, so they just kind of like play the game themselves at some point.
That seems like what happens probably. Like, or some secretive force gets to them while they're halfway to the truth and they become weapons of that secret. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Or if they
that's the
get too
more,
close, they like just get fed an insane amount of disinformation or whatever.
right. Or they commit suicide with a hose in their car in the middle of nowhere.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Episode
like, what was
2.
it like? Yeah, on a playground or whatever happened to him. Like
Yeah.
crazy shit.
Throwback. Episode
Uh,
2. What was
Morris
it?
K. Jeppes. Yeah.
Jessup. Jeppes.
Yeah. Morris K.
Was that our second episode or our third episode?
I think it was the second one.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the third. Uh, I don't know. I just don't know.
No, actually I think it was the third, because the second one was Old Fashioned Contact about
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the
Betty
third
and
episode.
Barney and what other case did we talk about in there?
I don't know.
Two of the most famous
Adamski.
ones. Oh yeah, we talked about Adamski, right?
George.
Yeah. So yeah, the Jessup Dimension was the third one. That's a really strange story. We don't have the minutes here to go back into that, but check that one out.
No. Maybe we should someday just like do a remix of the episode.
Oh, I mean, we could go back on Adamski and like,
Yeah.
it's Greer kind of like gets to the weird like racism of the Nordic ETs thing in this, and how like
That's nice.
the benevolent space brothers are essentially Aryans, blonde hair,
Right.
like tall white aliens. So it's
He does, yeah. He like has so many good points in this documentary, and then like the rest of it is just so I don't know, like off.
yeah. I mean, yeah. It's very confused. I'm just left more confused when I watch stuff that like kind of encapsulates it all in this like
Right.
grand ploy. That's why I mean I really enjoy like talking about it in this way, but I really really enjoy talking about the specific cases and incidents.
Yeah, me
Because
too.
then you're allowed to really like isolate symbols, isolate like the strangeness of a singular event for somebody, and start to like make
Right.
some interesting connections. Where it's kind of just like really drawing a lot of lines in the sand, where it's like it's this way or it's that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I don't know.
let's talk about Sirius real quick.
Oh
Sirius,
yeah, the Atacama humanoid.
yeah, that's a documentary that he released in about, I want to say like 2011 or 12.
Might have been later than that.
No,
Let
no,
me
no,
see.
no, no, no. I think it's like 2013 at latest.
I got $50 on it. 2013. Yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah.
I was right.
No, you weren't. No,
uh,
that's actually kind of like I wanted to save this for the back end because this is like, that was like not my introduction to Steven Greer. It was like at a time when I was just starting to like listen to a ton of like ufological podcasts and stuff like
yeah,
that, and like the whole disclosure movement was really like a huge topic, and really just like listening to a lot of coast to coast and shit to like kill time at work and whatnot. um Stephen Greer was one of the more like, coherent sounding people on there, which isn't necessarily a good thing because when you listen to coast, like you kind of want the wacky shit. But
right. Yeah,
so yeah, no, he was hyping up Sirius, the documentary, and there's the big like reveal in it was like we have like never before obtained information about the alien phenomena. We have a recovered alien specimen. And
right.
it's like, if you look at the picture of this specimen, it's pretty sick. It's like
Yeah,
a mummified, very tiny person, that
yeah,
looks a lot like an alien. It's like 8 inches tall, and it is like the biomaterial was examined by somebody at like some legit university in the United States. I don't remember which one, but like they basically said that it was like an anomalous human specimen, but it's like a tiny human.
very tiny.
Uh,
That whole thing reminds me of. Do you remember? It was probably 2 years or so, maybe a year before that. They had that huge event in Mexico, like hosted by the guy Jaime Maussan, where
mm,
they had that photo, and it was very similar to the Atacama humanoid, and it was like a Kodachrome like
I do.
slide,
Yeah, right.
and they had like hundreds of people in this giant auditorium, and then like no one would talk about it at all, and they revealed it, and it was like, and they live streamed it, and it was like $30 to live stream, and I did it, and I was watching it,
It's so fake. That's what we
and
did.
yeah,
I remember we did that with Sirius. We paid like,
yeah,
I don't know, $20 for the live stream. It didn't
yeah,
even work. We were watching this like red carpet fucking
yeah,
like event of the Sirius documentary. I don't even think we like. I had work the next day. We didn't even get to watch the documentary. It didn't get to it. It was like such a fucking sham. And I guess that's how you
yeah,
could see like where the money drawing in
right,
is of this whole thing. The
yeah,
allure. I don't know if you could get away with that kind of thing at this point. Like that maybe people just moved on to like the Q crowd and like
right,
that like gatekeeper of information or interpreter, oracle of
yeah,
information type of thing became like a means of creating a social media personality and stuff.
right.
But
Instead of doing like the big event,
yeah,
I miss the event. It's like it's so like yeah, it's so goofy.
honestly though, like another thing in this Greer doc, I guess maybe this is one of the last things we'll get to here, but he's talking about Jeremy Corbell, who
Yeah.
uh, I should say he's like disparagingly talking about him, and
I
showing
like
clips
that.
of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy Corbell was the director who did the Bob Lazar movie. He also did the Hunt for the Skinwalker movie,
Yeah.
which are very like, whatever you think about those, they're very powerful tools, in terms of like manipulating narratives about the phenomena. I think
Yeah.
the Bob Lazar one is narrated by Mickey Rourke, and it's got like this very dramatic
Yeah.
soundtrack, and you know, there are parts where he's just like, what are they hiding? What the fuck are they hiding? And like,
Right.
yeah, it's just like a super dramatic tool, and it's odd because he was also a mouthpiece in this whole media frenzy concerning the Tic Tac videos, and
Right.
Corbell.
That guy rubs me the wrong way, Corbell.
Yeah, he seems like he's like, uh, you know, uh, part of the limited hangout or whatever. But like,
Yeah.
he, yeah, it's weird that he plays into the whole defense narrative. He reifies the whole defense narrative of these things are in our airspace and whatever. But his
Right.
those two documentaries are also like, you know, a lot of people's entry point into the field, especially the Bob Lazar one, is like a ton of people's entry point into the ufology thing. So it really makes you wonder, like, what are they doing with the narrative in that Bob Lazar thing, you know?
I think something that I kind of realized with Fat Bob Lazar thing, and kind of with any of these documentaries, is that when these figures are like exposed in that, even if it's like a positive, like pro their narrative, like film, the like exposure to air of these people, like almost instantly, like shrivels and destroys their like mystique and like their convincingness.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah,
Like I was like all on board with the Bob Lazar thing since I heard about him. I was like, this rocks. Like this would be great. Like I don't want to think about it too hard. I want to read some internet forums and like some sort of sketchy, like sort of strange interviews with the guy and see like a news segment of him from the 90s. I don't want to see a documentary of him today, like trying to convince me in high def. Like it's obviously fake if that's like once you get to that point. And it's like, I don't think that means that the whole, like, I'm not like trying to say that that means all these people are liars. I just think that it has to do with like the mechanics of this sort of semi mystical phenomenon. Like
right,
when there's too much light on it, it's like kind of like fairy in that way. Like
uh-huh,
it,
yeah.
if there's like too much of like a sunlight on it or whatever, it
It's
kind of disappears.
it's hilarious too because I think we spend a lot of time on this show, like, you know, flashing a light in the dark a little bit on like, you
Yeah.
know, these documentaries or you know, these characters within ufology. But then like at the same time, like I would say in the same breath, like, yeah, you gotta watch it. Like you have
Right.
like I don't know, like watching all this shit, like um it really like layers the context of it and kind of like get,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't say it helps you like, you know, separate the wheat from the chaff or whatever, but I think it just like it gives
It's
you
part of the
more.
full picture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It just
Yeah.
like it lends itself to the spectrum. I think like the Hunt for the Skinwalker documentary. Um, I have a strong distrust for Jeremy Corbell, but I think it's a
Right.
really interesting watch, just for
I don't
like
know. It's so pretentious.
the what yeah, but like the narrative that has been created around Skinwalker Ranch and what
Hmm.
that is versus like what people think it is versus what people are
Yeah.
trying to make you think it is so interesting.
Right.
So yeah, I mean,
But yeah, it's part of the puzzle.
we should just do a whole Skinwalker episode probably at some point because it's
Yeah, we did one on Patreon like a year and a half ago, but that was not a full. That was more like a sort of a dip into it.
that was about the TV show. Yeah,
That TV show was rocking. Yeah, I love that TV show.
so goofy. I can't like you love that TV show, man. What is that TV show?
I mean, I just
Oh
I
man,
like Oak Island style television where it's like just it's more about the personalities of these people. It's just endless bickering between like these people that are supposed to be like highly credentialed and like they're supposed to be like stumbling on like cosmic secrets, but like they spend like 3 episodes investigating like a hollowed out cow.
there's
It's just
nothing
like
like highly credentialed about those people. There's like one guy who's like
it's one scientist. That's what I
one
mean.
scientist who's supposedly credentialed, like a Mormon real estate mogul, and like
That guy's got some kind of credential.
a security actor named Dragon. Like, Come on, man.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But that wasn't the point I meant really. It's just like it's like a drama almost. It's like a Skinwalker Ranch themed soap opera, even though it's like supposedly true.
Right. Yeah,
I don't know.
I say watch it all, Watch
Yeah, right. That's my opinion too.
watch the Cosmic Hoax, watch Hunt for the Skinwalker, read every Twitter thread. It's like
Don't do
you
don't do
shouldn't
that.
even say Skinwalker,
Right.
just get into the minutia as hard as possible till you want to like rip your eyes out or something. But
Yeah. I mean, that's the only way you can have. I mean, like obviously we're probably still prone to being manipulated and psyoped as much as the next person. But I feel like the more you expose yourself to like every angle of the thing, the more immunity you kind of build up against like becoming a cult member and like somebody's like,
oh, that's fair, but we're just
yeah.
like already a part of the cult of like disillusion, and so it's like
I don't know. I mean, it at least in some cases at some times, but I still feel pretty illusioned about a lot of stuff, like in a good way.
mhm.
It's just not like New York Times style UFO disclosure. Nah, I'm pretty disillusioned about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess we could hop out on the Cosmic Hoax. What a great name, though.
Good name.
Nailed it.
I
with
wonder
that
if you
one.
listened to the Cosmic Trickster by Consensus on Reality.
Right. Well, it's funny he like named
Probably not.
the documentary I started watching last night was called Above Top Secret, and there's already
Like so many things called that.
there's another Above Top Secret from like 2 years ago by like the people who would be the faces of Gaia Network and shit, like fucking
Oh, yep. Oh, yeah. I was wondering, like, why are you watching that? But he made like,
yeah.
there's a book too by Timothy Good. It's just like and then there's like the Above Top Secret forums from like the golden age of the internet. But
Yeah.
it's all above top secret.
Ugh.
You'll never know.
Jeepers creepers. Thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Sign up for our Patreon.
Sign up for patreon.com/consensusunreality. We get even crazier there, I swear. So check it out. It's $5 a month. It's the only way to support what we do. So if you enjoy that, we really appreciate people going over there and subscribing. It means a lot to us. It gives us the willpower to watch and talk about all this strange stuff. We'll see you next.
All right.
We'll talk to you next time.
Yeah.